The first Greeks were the Minoans and Mycenaeans. The Minoans lived mostly on the island of Crete. They did not speak ancient Greek, but had their own language. The Mycenaeans lived on mainland Greece and were the first to speak a type of ancient Greek. Both civilizations eventually disappeared, but many other towns and cities were built throughout the region. Greece as a country did not exist yet. Instead, there were many city-states, known as a polis. A city-state was like a miniature country, made up of a city and the countryside around it. The main city in the polis usually had walls for protection, public spaces for temples, government buildings and the agora. There were over 1,000 polis in ancient Greece. They had their own rulers, laws, coins and ideas, but shared a common language and believed in the same gods and goddesses. The city-states would often go to war with each other, but they would also unite to fight other empires, e.g., the Persians. There were three ways of ruling a city-state in ancient Greece: democracy, monarchy and oligarchy. A democracy is where the citizens of a city-state can vote for, and decide what happens. For example, in Athens, any citizen could come up with a new law, vote on whether new laws should be allowed, or vote for punishments for criminals. A monarchy is a government where one person rules, usually a king or queen. They had advisors to help them, but they could generally do whatever they wanted. At first, when a king or queen died, a new one would be chosen from the city-state. However, this was later changed so that the monarch's oldest son would become the new ruler. The city-state of Macedonia was an example of a monarchy. Finally, an oligarchy is where the city-state is ruled by a small group of men. These men were usually the most important, and richest men in the city-state. They shared power and made decisions together. Sparta is a famous example of an oligarchy. However, instead of rich men, they used retired warriors to make decisions. As mentioned before, the city-states might have been separate, but they had the same beliefs. Greek mythology can be very confusing, with the primordial gods such as Chaos, Cronus and Gaia, then the titans such as Cronus, Rhea and Oceanus, followed by the Olympian gods. There were also hundreds of other gods, spirits, immortals and mythological creatures. We will just be focusing on the Olympian gods and goddesses. Just like the Egyptians, the Greeks came up with gods and goddesses to explain things they didn't understand. They believed that the gods and goddesses controlled their lives. Any skills or talents they had were given to them by the gods, and if they angered them, could be taken away. So, they would often give offerings or sacrifices to different gods to keep them happy. They built temples for the various gods and goddesses, and each city-state would usually have their favorite god. Important families would also try to claim that they were descended from different gods as well, to make them powerful. According to mythology, most of the important gods and goddesses lived at the top of Mount Olympus. There were usually 12 Olympian gods that were followed. However, the gods might change depending on the city-state, from the 14 we will look at next. Zeus was king of the Olympian gods. He was also the god of the sky and thunder. He was the most powerful of the Olympian gods. If people made him angry, he would often turn them into animals. Hera was the wife of Zeus, and queen of the Olympian gods. She was the goddess of women, marriage and childbirth. Both Hera and Zeus lived on Mount Olympus, ruling together. Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes and horses, was the brother of Zeus. Preferred to live in his palace under the sea rather than on Mount Olympus. Competed with Athena to be the main god of Athens, but lost. Apollo, god of music and poetry, was the twin brother of Artemis. Had the power to heal people. His lyre was created for him by Hermes. Lived on Mount Olympus. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, twin sister of Apollo, lived on Mount Olympus. Usually pictured holding a bow and arrow. She had perfect aim and could turn herself, or others, into an animal. Hermes' main job was as messenger of the gods, but was also the god of travel and thieves. He was able to travel everywhere very quickly due to his winged sandals. Carried a special wand called a caduceus. Lived on Mount Olympus. Athena, goddess of wisdom and courage. She was the patron goddess of Athens. Lived on Mount Olympus. She would often show up in Greek myths helping the heroes on their adventures. Ares, god of war. He was known for being very cruel and no one really liked him, even his parents. Was a skilled fighter in battles and usually shown holding a shield and spear. Lived on Mount Olympus. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. Lived on Mount Olympus. According to one myth, she was born by floating up on a shell in the sea near Paphos, Cyprus. She was married to the god Hephaestus. Demeter, goddess of the harvest. She lived on Mount Olympus. She was extremely important to the Greeks, because if they didn't keep her happy, then they wouldn't be able to grow any food. The following gods, and goddess, are the ones that changed depending on the city-state. 2 of them, plus the 10 before, would make the 12 Olympian gods and goddesses. Hephaestus, god of fire and the forge. Lived on Mount Olympus. Was known as a kind and peaceful god, even though he created the weapons used by the other Olympians. Hades, god of the underworld. Brother of Zeus and Poseidon. Lived in a palace in the underworld. Could become invisible. Had a 3-headed dog that guarded the underworld, called Cerberus. Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Lived on Mount Olympus. Oldest of the Olympian gods. According to some myths, she got fed up with the gods arguing all the time and decided to give up her place as one of the main 12 Olympian gods to Dionysus. Dionysus, god of wine, parties and the theatre. Was the only Olympian god with a mortal parent, his mother, Semele. Most ancient Greek plays were written to be performed during a yearly festival to Dionysus.